put yourself in an environment where you can learn fast, like wherever it is, like whether it's an organization in a similar industry to where you want to be in your startup, or whether there's like specific facets of any other organization that you can learn from, do it. And most importantly, again, depending on where you are, be quite open with what you do on the outside, because to me at least, and it might not be the same for other employers, but if I'm seeing that someone has more skills to their armory than just their basic CV and where they went to uni or where they did an apprenticeship or what grades they got at A-level, and I can see that you've created your own experience by starting something up, but you want to take a step back from that, or you want to do it on the side, to me I find that way more impressive than someone who I'm just looking at their grades.
Welcome to another episode of Big Risk Energy. On this podcast, we talk to an amazing range of people. We talk to these people about risk they've taken in their lives, risk they've taken in their careers, when they paid off and when they didn't. And on today's show, I'm blessed to be joined by the one and only Ndubuisi Uchea. Did I get that right?
Ish, kind of.
Ndubuisi
Uchea.
Uchea. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Do you know what it is? I don't know about you, but dyslexia and names which I don't usually recognize, which is ironic because I have one of those names as well. You think I'd be better at it by now?
Nah, it gets like that. It's cool.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So, really interesting story that you've got in terms of starting with a commercial corporate career and then obviously building something along the side, which, did it start as a side hustle initially?
Yeah, it started, you know what, I guess similar to your journey with Real Talk and Real Sports. Like myself and my business partner, a very good friend of mine, Hyle, we were at uni in our final year up in Manchester. And I guess you're in that final year, you're in that space where you're just like, what the hell do I do with my degree that I've spent a lot of money on and 3 years doing? And like you're, in the midst of applying for grad jobs. And within that conversation, we were like, if we were to ever start our own business, like what would that look like? The one thing that we knew that we were quite good at as a group of friends was just having debates. Like, as I'm sure anybody in uni understands, you go on a night out, you come back, you're in your dorm rooms or you're in your living room with your mates and you're just having conversations about like everything from gender politics to sex to religion, like everything that you could think of. But then you look on the TV and the depiction of young people is just not that.
Yes.
Like it's completely far removed from the realities of the nuance of young people. And so talking about government funding, we decided to ultimately use some of our student loan to go and buy a camera, because the one thing that we were sure as hell we wanted to do was depict our realities a bit better. And it actually came very close to a day where I finally found myself in a uni library and me and my friend were on the way home on our street that we rent in a Russell Group University, and like a massive police van just like swerved onto the road, came out, jumped out, held us up against the fence and started aggressively stopping and searching us. Wasn't the first time it happened, won't be the last either, but to us it was like a real reminder that doesn't matter where you are in society, like you could be in the upper echelons or wherever you are, that the aesthetic of you as a person from any group will always precede that. That was the turning point of us saying to ourselves, we need to do something about this. Like we need to better portray and depict the realities of young people in news, media, marketing, what have you. And for us, the thing that we decided to do was buy a camera and start to go onto campus and asking people their opinions on current affairs, news, various topics. And that's why it's called Word on the Curb. We were literally just on the street getting the word from uni students, and that was like kind of our first kind of foray into doing this as a bit of a passion project, as you said.
Wow. And did you find you were getting traction quickly on those videos?
It was funny because like we didn't actually put the videos anywhere
until
we graduated, and then when we moved back down to London, we were away from that campus environment, and so we could do vox pops, we could do that kind of stuff. We struggled with the direction of doing vox pops with just random Londoners initially. So we decided to flip it a little bit and do spoken word video content. At the time, like Jamal Edwards, rest in peace, like was very much like pushing that kind of platform on YouTube and like how do we engage with people through music. And we were like, well, you know, everyone wants to be a spoken word poet at this moment in time. Like, why don't we try and find an ecosystem to challenge spoken word artists to keep things concise and speak about topical issues? And so that's how we then kind of turned the initial phase at uni into something a bit more of like a creative venture and used YouTube as a platform. And then very quickly we started to amass like a massive audience online. And I guess not just from a following perspective, but we noticed very early on that people were quite passionate about the topics we were focused on. And so, you know, they'd like find our email address and email us to say like, how do I get involved? And we didn't really know at the time, how the hell do you get involved beyond like being on camera? But we knew the importance of an engaged community and having ultimately a database. So we continued to pretty much like collect the data from people who were interested in the content that we were producing. And then fast forward to now, like we understand how we can use that, which is through, you know, research-led and insight-led creative communications as an agency, basically.
Yeah, of course. And I want to dive into that, but take me back to that point where you're starting to see some really amazing traction. You're seeing a lot of people identifying with the mission. And, you know, when you've got people hunting you down saying, how can I get involved? You know, that screams real market demand, right? So at that point, are you faced with a decision then? Do you go all in on this? Are you looking at, well, you also need to make money in the short term because as we know, building an entrepreneurial activity takes a while to monetize. So what are you going through in that moment in terms of how you're prioritizing things and the decisions you've got to make about your future?
The decisions for me were taken away like by my parents, to be honest. It was like, you know, we sent you to uni, you know, we wanted you to be a doctor. You failed at that quite quickly because you were doing your whole student event stuff. Now you've come back from Manchester with a camera. Like, what are you doing? You've got a biomedical material science degree. And there was just no way that I was going to be able to go all in at that stage without, to your point, an understanding of revenue and money. Because also, as well as that being the reality, I don't think we ever really thought at that point that we're doing this to earn money anyway. It was just something that we did as a bit of a passion project and were quite good at it. And yeah, my parents was just like, just go and get a bloody job. Like, go and so I got I secured a place on the grad scheme at L'Oreal in February 2014. So I graduated in July 2013, and in that space of time, we were kind of like doing our own video content, working part time here and there. But then in February 2014, it was like, okay, cool, you've now gone and got a full-time job. My business partner, he got a job at ITV. So we kind of like had the old 9 to 5, 5 to 9, where we still carried on the YouTube channel. We were still creating content, but very much like in our spare time, not really even spare time, but in our outside time. But yeah, it was like find a way to make money. And I think the thing I always say is it was a massive benefit. Like being in a multinational organization that makes loads of money, you're able to, you know, a very good family friend of mine always said to me, like very early on, learn how to lose other people's money before you lose yours. And it's like, you know, taking the risks in an organization is way easier because, you know, you don't know the person who's losing the money.
You're
and
not going to feel that pain.
You're not feeling the
way.
pain. And to me, that's always been like a piece of advice. And I hate giving advice because it's always, you know, up to you whether you take it. And it's also very much like depends on who you are as a person. But for me, that piece of advice was very transformational because you can do that, but then also you have an ecosystem where in our case, we realized how terrible some big organizations are at reaching their end consumer and how for them, when they found out what I was doing, at first I kept it hidden and then they found out and it was like, wow, like this is amazing. Like you can help us to do our youth engagement strategy on digital. So then you start to build name for yourself in the lane that you've created in an organization. You know, they call it intrapreneurship. And so like I found that very, very helpful. Now, especially, you can always look back, but now to the success of the business is very much in those like understanding how big organizations work, and you can apply that knowledge very much so in your organization. So at the time, yeah, it was like go and get a job and grow in that job.
Super interesting though, because you're right. You know, the list of clients that you've worked with now is so impressive in terms of the businesses that you've been able to monetize. And, you know, being in the startup world myself, businesses can take 5 years before they can pull in the names that you've pulled in, and a lot of them don't make it that long because they aren't able to get revenue along the way, whatever it might be. But you're right, getting that insight on both sides of the table and understanding how a multinational will approach a situation, you can only ever get that expertise by being in there yourself. So I can see why that would be such a massive benefit. And so I think you went full time 2017, right? You made the jump then?
Yeah.
And what were the sort of indicators to you that now's the time to go? Because it's one of the things that I speak to so many people who are doing the side hustle thing, and a lot of people ask for advice. When's the time to jump ship? I would love to get your view.
So whilst I said like earlier on that, you know, we didn't have an intention of like understanding revenue, but we understood it very quickly. So I think within a year, our first revenue client was Channel 4, and they came to us and were like, you guys are making content that we want to make on our news platform, engaging the audiences that you guys are engaging. We're struggling to do so. So can you help us in our news platform? So between 2014 and 2016, it was like ad hoc projects with Channel 4, and we did it very consistently. And then we added like The Guardian and then a few like government organizations to the name. Obviously it was a bit more like news and current affairs in the initial phases. So that's kind of probably reflection of the organizations that we worked with at the time. And so when that happened, that's when I guess like my natural entrepreneurial mind was like, hang on a minute, cool, here's the opportunity then. Organizations are struggling to reach with younger audiences, with minority demographics, and we are not. So that's our sell, like at a very base level. And so when that happened in 2014, I was like, all right, well, I've always been that kid, like we spoke about at uni, but then even before that, that one who'd buy Krispy Kreme donuts by the dozen and sell them individually.
Yep.
Bit of a loan shark as well. I'd like, don't worry, if you've not got money today, that's cool. You can pay me double tomorrow. So like, what does that look like within what we've created? And so I said, me and Hayal were saying to ourselves, right, let's keep a track. The moment that we make enough money to pay ourselves like the bare minimum to just survive for a year is the moment that we'll go full time.
Yeah.
And that's what we said.
Amazing.
And
that's
so,
a really good benchmark. Yeah.
And so we got to that stage. We were both living at home still. So I guess like in some respect, that amount of money wasn't as much as it would need to be if you were renting.
Yeah, of course.
And so yeah, we got to that point. We got to that number, and then I said, you know, like, let's do it. Like, let's just do it. And I think the thing that I always say, just from experience, is, of course, it's a risk, of course, but it's also a risk to stay in your job. Like, and so I said, there's no way that if this fails, we couldn't go and get another job. Yeah. Having done what we've done already and the experience that we're going to get from trialing something, there's absolutely no way that we won't get a job again. So let's just do it. In my case, because of the parents that I have, whilst they could see the success of the early success of the business, they like heard my name on TV read out by Jon Snow. It was still not enough for them to be fully confident. And I understand it. Like, different demographic, different set of circumstances, you know, their life experiences. I completely understand it. So the thing that I just said to just build a bit more confidence was, let me take a sabbatical. Okay. So that time when we made enough money, that the money number coincided with being at L'Oreal for 3 years. And at the 3-year mark, they allow you to take a year sabbatical. It's really great, actually.
That's crazy.
So I did that, and I said to my mum and dad, like, look, I'm going back in a year. Let me just try this out for a year. And that's basically what happened.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think when you are involved with a corporate, that's that understanding, but also sounds like was so receptive to what you were doing and really helped you along the way. I mean, that's amazing. And I think there is a lot to be. I'm normally the first to dismiss working in a corporate.
Yeah.
But I think everyone I've spoken to has given me very good reasons for why it helped them within their entrepreneurial journey. And I think the reality is, if you're an entrepreneur, you'll always be an entrepreneur, and you'll always make the most out of the set of experiences that you do have and apply them into the world that's going to help you on. So I guess if you have that mindset, there'll be a ton that you can extract from the corporate world on that side. 100%. Okay, really interesting. And you've made the leap. Obviously, well, I'm assuming, because of my own experiences, even after you make the leap and you get traction, there are the moments which come up with, I can't believe I've made this mistake of making this leap. And there's really difficult moments, there's existential moments where it's like, we're 6 weeks away from being fucked or whatever it is. What goes through your mind in those moments when it's like, I could be in a really, really safe career right now?
Do you know what? Like, it happens even now. I'll be honest. Like, it happens now. The law of safety is a big law, like, for everybody. Most people in life, I think, give or take, want similar things. They want like quite a comfortable life. They want to be loved. They want to love. They want to enjoy themselves. Like, that's very easy to get in an organization most of the time. And so that law, it happens frequently. Obviously, earlier on, it happens a lot more. And I think probably the biggest challenge was a year after taking the sabbatical, when you have to get back in touch with your employer.
Right.
And say what you want. And in my case, like, I did that. I said, I'm not gonna come back. And moving back to what I said earlier about like the skill set that you get from starting up your own business, they said, okay, cool. But then I got a call back 2 days later saying, we actually have a new role that we'd like to offer you within the digital team. And the offer that they gave me was a mental offer. And at that point, I was like, okay, my head is gone now. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, what do I do at this point? And then again, like, I guess I've been blessed in a way to like have good people around me to advise. And I just called someone who I knew would probably give me like objective advice. And he said to me, like, are you confident in yourself that amount of money that they're offering you can make maybe in like 3, 4, 5 years with the business that you are doing? So I said, yeah, like, I'm quite confident. He's like, all right, cool, then don't take it, because, it's very easy to sell people on a number, an immediate number. But the reality is, for any entrepreneur, it's the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the line that you need to think about, because the difference is exponential, as you'll know. And like, that's from a very granular, specific, numerical lens. But then you can take any other measurement of things, which is like, for me, I quite like working in opportunities. I like seeing opportunities. I like the flexibility of having something different on a day-to-day. You struggle to get that from most organizations. And so that was probably the biggest, like, and then when I turned it down, and then you're faced with like, I'm working like 8 till 8, like, I've forgotten to eat, I don't have any money to eat. That's when you're then like, bloody hell, I should have just done and taken that offer, because life would have been so much easier. Your relationships are like a struggle because you don't have any time. Like, all of these things are the reality of what being an entrepreneur, a startup, or running your own business looks like. And I think I'm always very honest about it, because one of the pieces of research we did recently was around youth entrepreneurship. And I think the stat now is that 62% of young people between the ages of 16 to 24 say that they want to run their own business.
Yes, I've seen this.
I think it's 62%.
Yeah, it's around there. Maybe even slightly higher.
Maybe even slightly higher. And to me, that is amazing. But it's also like,
you have no idea what you're getting yourself in for.
You know what you're getting yourself in for? Like, because you need to know. Like, and you need to know the realities of it, because it is flipping difficult.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Super interesting. So many things come to mind off the back of what you're saying. I think one of them is the need to see long term. right? Is the need to see long term as an entrepreneur and not get distracted by short term gratification. And how much has the fact that you are mission driven with the business helped within that? Because when it does come to making those sacrifices, working those hours, removing that safety blanket, how much do you find that having mission behind what you're doing, as well as satisfying your entrepreneurial desire and everything else, how much does that come into in those really challenging moments where it's like, well, no, we're doing this for a reason, not just because this is psychologically what I enjoy?
It's beauty and beast, man. Like, because the beautiful thing is with mission-driven organizations, if it were, that like you see the purpose beyond yourself, right? So you see what you're building and it's hopefully greater than you. But then the curse is you're probably a bit slower to make decisions that you need to make quicker based on money. And just the reality that actually for a lot of organizations, for all organizations, whether you're a charity or not, or a social enterprise or just a for-profit organization, money rules how you move. The more cash you have, the easier the business is to run. Like it's just a fact from my experience anyway. And so like, I always have this like grapple with, if you were profit driven and then mission driven second, like how much quicker would you get to the mission rather than being mission driven first and profit driven second?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a really interesting one.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer. Like, and it obviously is very nuanced and it depends on what industry you're in and what type of business you have. But I think to answer your question more directly, I guess it was a bit of a help to be able to say to myself, like, okay, cool, this is an idea that is beyond me. We can take a little bit of a hit on the margin and we can take a little bit of a hit on like what we're paying ourselves because, you know, there is something that we're trying to solve here and there's a problem we're trying to solve here. And I guess it gives you a bit more of a headspace than when you're like deep down and dealing with numbers and looking at like your growth trajectory and like how much runway you have and all of these things that I think at the early stages of business don't matter as much because it's kind of the risk is on you and maybe your co-founder. You know, so like it really is like, how badly can I live my life to keep this going? Like,
how much pain am I willing to take?
Yeah, exactly. Rather than you've got staff and you're like, if we have a terrible month, it affects them.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, and unfortunately, that's the reality of business, which is, and it's something that I think we all as entrepreneurs probably at least need to be mindful of, is that you're always not the priority. You're never the priority.
Yes.
Like you're never the priority in your business. It's always other people.
Yeah.
And so like, I think being a bit more mission driven at the beginning helps you to kind of overcome those like hurdles. I've found.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's super interesting. And going back to your point about, I think the responsibility that entrepreneurs have to educate the younger generation about the realities of being an entrepreneur. What would you say to a young entrepreneur now who says, okay, I hear what you're saying, that it's going to be difficult, but what does that actually mean?
What does it actually mean? I use the word, my wife's going to laugh, but I use this word a lot. Nuance is important. Nuance is very important. And I can only give my experience, right?
Of course.
And like, what does it mean? I think it means that it's not, do you know what? It's not even about working hard. Like anybody can work hard and you can work hard in a certain time parameter. It's working long. It's probably working not smart as well because it's very hard to prioritize things as an entrepreneur. It's very hard to prioritize things when you're starting a business because you can do everything and nothing at the same time. So you have to work long hours. Like I don't really, especially at the beginning, like I don't think, from my experience, I don't think it's possible to not have a certain number of days in a week where you're working probably too many hours to get something off the ground. I don't believe it's possible.
It's not possible. I'm sure it's like, not possible.
Unfortunately, the reality that we have at the moment is you have a lot of people who speak in retrospect. So like they've become successful massively. And the easy thing to do is to say, look after yourself and prioritize yourself. I completely agree. That is very important.
Yeah.
But it's just not a reality at the beginning of a business. It just isn't. And fundamentally, I think anybody who is pushing that agenda needs to think quite carefully about like their responsibility, because they're doing it in retrospect. And the reality is they definitely were not looking after themselves at the beginning.
100%. It's something which I talk about the whole time, is the first 2 to 3 years of your company, you're a robot. It's nothing beyond just wake up, do whatever it is that you need to get done. If there's time for anything else, great, but don't expect there to be. And then it's, and we were just talking about this before, then the job of the founder, once you're at that tipping point, is then understanding how to unpin yourself from all these things to allow the organization to scale.
Exactly.
But year 1 through 3, 2 through 3 for sure, it's always going to be the way. If there's no one else to do it, you have to do it.
Yeah, precisely.
It can't not be done.
You're wearing like every hat under the sun. Your sales, your HR, your admin, your everything. Like you're literally everything in what you see as in an organization, and all of the different departments and all of the different people in the same department as well. You're all of those people.
And you probably don't know anything about
and
those departments.
And you don't know anything about anything. You do not. You're literally just winging it all the way. You're Googling stuff. You're doing it all, right?
Yes.
And until you can relinquish some of that, in my case, for example, I have a co-founder. I have a very good friend as a co-founder. So we're able to move along together in that journey. And in some respect, and we probably found this out way too late. So, in some respect, you can delegate things to each other, and you can have your own separation where you're dealing with certain parts of the business.
Yeah.
Hopefully to your strengths as well. And if you do that well, then it takes off some of the pressure. If you have a good close group of friends around you that might support you, but again, it comes with its own territory of issue where you're working with a big group of friends. So probably you're letting things slip and slide a little bit because you might be having a bit of banter and enjoying it along the way. So yeah, it's push and pull, it's give and take. But the one thing I'd say is, I say this all the time, and I wouldn't change this for myself, is put yourself in, you might disagree, but put yourself in an environment where you can learn fast, wherever it is, whether it's an organization in a similar industry to where you want to be in your startup, or whether there's specific facets of any other organization that you can learn from, do it. And most importantly, again, depending on where you are, be quite open with what you do on the outside, because to me at least, and it might not be the same for other employers, but if I'm seeing that someone has more skills to their armory than just their basic CV and where they went to uni or where they did an apprenticeship or what grades they got at A-level, and I can see that you've created your own experience by starting something up, but you want to take a step back from that, or you want to do it on the side, to me, I find that way more impressive than someone who I'm just looking at their grades. And
without a doubt.
So just be open with it, and that's what I would say. I think trying to find experience where experience already exists, or making your own is important, because then you start to learn the mistakes before you start your own thing in earnest.
And I think as well, more and more so with the threat of automation, having more strings to your bow, even if you're never intending to go full time on your side project, but having something which makes you look more retainable, more well-rounded to your employer is only going to be a good thing.
100%.
I think if you go too narrow over the next 10, 15 years, the risk of being replaced by some technology increases exponentially.
Yeah.
Having that breadth of experience where you're doing something entrepreneurial or work, helping a friend with their startup, whatever it might be, I think that's the way to really for individuals to really protect themselves and their future earning potential. So couldn't agree with you more on that. Okay, so there's a few questions, not quick fire or anything. We'll go through these over 15 minutes or whatever, that I'd love to ask you.
Quickly though, you see on your point around automation.
Yes.
Where do you think, because I find this is a conversation fascinating, do you think that automation reduces the workforce in
100%.
terms of number?
Absolutely. Not in terms of, it doesn't reduce the workforce, but it reduces the amount of jobs available to the workforce. And I think within 20 years' time, there'll be lots of new jobs, but the amount of new jobs that come through will be nowhere near the amount of jobs that are lost because of automation. And I think I made this prediction on this podcast about 4 months ago. I said within 12 months, you'll see the first anti-AI protests and demonstrations. And it's already gone with, and it's been one of the most high-profile one you can with the Screen Actors Guild, right? And the fact that they're already now not going to work because of the threat of AI. And this is within, one of the most public industries, let alone industries where automation can happen in a way where people are much less aware of it. But I genuinely believe within 18 months from now, you will have the first anti-AI riots because people can't get work in the way that they used to. And it's... ironically, the best paid jobs, the ones that automation will come in first. So probably the most defensible jobs are the incredibly manual ones. But even then, with the way that robotics are improving, it's an inevitability for me. The question is, how do we respond to it? And I think I really think where some companies are going to be the big winners of AI, and not just the companies bringing through the automation like the chat GPTs, whatever. It's actually going to be companies which allow users to monetize their data and their attention. Because that's something which we all have in spades, right? So I think you're going to have, if TikTok figure that out, and I think they'll be the first to do that. That's my feeling, is if they are allowing you to monetize when you consume content, that's basically UBI. That's basically universal basic income, right? I will get paid for watching TikTok. And I see that's where it's going to be in 5-6 years' time.
It's really interesting hearing that. I think I've seen, to your point, you start to see automation affect people. So like my wife's a writer. So like she'll get stuff through, ask her to write courses and or itineraries for travel and things like that, and she started to see within that part of her business less and less work over the last year, because in her opinion, she feels like people are just using ChatGPT for certain things or other AI tools. But to your last point, I think it's the opportunity that often gets lost in these conversations, which is there's probably like a delta where there's going to be a decrease in jobs as we know it. But what's the opportunity on the other side? Which is where I think, for young people who are, talking about starting businesses and all of these kinds of things, they are always going to be the early adopters in any technological shift. And that's where I find a fascination in where the kind of like the democratization of technology and who is going to get to be the early adopters and who's going to make the most money from that.
And I think the next few years is going to be the best time ever for entrepreneurs to make money because of the way that we're going to be able to scale our businesses with AI. So within 2 years, you're not going to need a sales force. You're not going to need a customer service team because everything will be totally conversational AI, right? So from my perspective as a business owner, for example, I have so much more scalability, much better profit margins, everything else. The worry is more like in 6 years if no one's got money who's buying. But even, it's funny, obviously the most used examples is content creators being cannibalized by ChatGPT. But I had knee surgery 6 weeks ago and I was going to do 20 physio sessions with my physio. And I got ChatGPT to build me a rehab plan day by day by exercise. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. That's literally $2,000 or whatever that I didn't spend with the physio. And all of my aftercare, rather than booking in with my expensive surgeon, ChatGPT. So I already see how I'm using it in a way to save my money. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm doing it, if I'm doing that, and this is, ultimately money I'm not spending, that's going to be the future, right? Your initial is going to be like, well, how can I solve it elsewhere? So that's not to say there won't be occasions where you need to spend that money with an individual because it's something really
You've
niche or like
or you've done the exercises wrong.
exactly yeah exactly that. But you know, my go-to is going to be, well, how can I solve this in a free and instant way? And it's not even necessarily about it being free. It's more, I couldn't get the initial physio appointment for 4 days. I was like, I want to start physio now.
Yeah.
You know, so it's I can see it happening quickly. We could probably talk about this for 5 hours.
Maybe
right?
it's another podcast.
Okay, so some questions for you. What's the single biggest risk you've ever taken, and what was the outcome?
Single biggest risk. I think probably the biggest risk was leaving my job. Because it was comfortable. It was very comfortable. Like, I could wake up at like 8:15 because it was around near my house as well. Wake up at 8:15 and just get to the office by like 9 or 9:02. It was comfortable, and I think like you look back and you're like, wow, the last 6 years have been very uncomfortable, but that's, to me, is where people need to be more in the uncomfortable zone. I think someone what is it? Someone said to me, if you're coasting, you can only coast downhill.
Ooh, I like that.
And so to me, I'm like, that you can't coast uphill. So you need to be uncomfortable, like constantly uncomfortable, so that you don't coast. Because there's only one way you're going if you're coasting. And like, you can look at that in so many different ways. But I think like taking risks to coin the name of your podcast, like it should be every day that people are taking risks, like however big or small they are, to get into that kind of like growth mindset area of life where, you know, you start to remove the things that you just, the known knowns, like, you know, you're good at something. So normally people just revert to type and keep doing that. But what about the unknowns? Like, what about things that you don't know you're good at? And you're only going to discover them by taking risks. So the outcome of the biggest risk I took probably is, you know, being able to understand those kind of concepts. Because I don't think when you're in a kind of like you're a wheel in a cog, I don't think it's very easy to not have to think outside of that.
Yeah.
Because it's comfortable. So yeah, like beyond the quote unquote successes of the organization, the freedom and flexibility, the beautiful nature of entrepreneurship, that you can grow a team and you can build a team who have a similar mission to you, and you can pay them, and you can like create ultimately jobs and do something with a very good friend of yours. Like, beyond that, there's also the like life learnings and lessons and places that you get put into, and having the reality that like, yeah, every day is quite uncomfortable, and that's amazing.
Love that.
That's it.
I think that's an amazing response. And a point you made earlier, which is I think is a really, really good one, is you felt that because your money number was less, because you didn't have dependents, you didn't have a mortgage at that time, obviously your ability to take that risk was much greater, or you're able to do it at an earlier stage.
Yeah.
And I think it's such an important lesson that the longer you leave it before taking the risk, the harder it gets, right?
100%. Like, it's that conundrum where like people, I feel like a lot of people will say, you know, like, get to a certain stage where you've got a lot of money and then take the risk. But normally, if you do that, your dependencies grow. So like, whether it's you've got children, or whether it's you've got a mortgage, or you want to move out of your parents, so you want to have rent, or you've got a mortgage, or
your
like,
lifestyles looks different as well.
Exactly. Your lifestyle looks different. When you're 23, 24, you can live a bit, you know, bummy. Yeah. Like, you can do you can take those risks more. So yeah, for me it worked out. Like, I didn't have, you know, that much of a dependency. You know, fortunate and blessed enough to have an environment where I can live with my parents back at home, so I don't have to pay rent. Like, so yeah, like whatever that looks like for you as an individual, find that earlier than later. Because yeah, like the idea for me now, if I was still in an organization, the idea of leaving what would be like a repeatable income when, you know, I've got a child on the way and I've got a mortgage and I've got, like, that would be really scary.
Yeah, 100%.
And a lot scarier than it was before.
And I think, if you set up a cadence in your personal life and personal relationships, it's difficult to make that switch at a later stage, right? It's a really interesting one. And one of my favorite sayings is the best time to do it was 10 years ago. The next best time is today.
Yeah.
So, okay, really, really cool. Nice one. Is there anything you wish you did differently?
I don't want to give like some philosophical answer and say no.
No, feel free.
No, because of the butterfly effect and all of that nonsense. But I do believe though. Before I get onto my response, I do believe that I'm a very firm believer that like everything, broadly speaking, happens for like a reason. There's often like a cause and effect of the way things go, and whether that's a faith or religion, or whether you just think that, like, that I firmly believe that. And so like I don't like the idea of changing things, because you never know what's going to happen down the way. But one thing I think I would say, because I think it hopefully would help people and helps myself to remember, is if you do have a co-founder, or if you do have someone who's supporting you or whatever, very quickly work out your strengths and your weaknesses and delineate the responsibilities based on those strengths and weaknesses, like as early as possible. Because the thing we spoke about you're everything, you're wearing all these hats and you're trying to learn and you're trying to bullshit your way through, will be a bit easier if you trust each other that, like, okay, cool, well, you're really good at writing, so you can write, our website copy and all of that kind of stuff. You're good at numbers, so you handle the finances. And don't try and do everything together, because it's just a waste of time. It's such a waste of time. Like we have a saying in the organization, which is based on our work: diversity is a reality and inclusion is a choice. And the world in its nature is a diverse world. Whether we as an organization or an industry or people decide to include the reality of that diversity is our choice. And I had this like mentorship session. Last year I was part of the Marketing Academy, so I got a scholarship to do this course. And one of the mentors was like, that's your phrase, right? You keep talking to me about this problem with prioritization. Well, time is a reality and prioritization is a choice. And that mantra is so fundamental to like the way that you live your life. Like we all have 24 hours in a day, as Molly May once said. We all have 24 hours in the day. We have the same 24 hours. But whether you choose to spend that time in the way that you need to is your choice. And I'm so terrible at prioritizing. I'm that kind of person that does the easier things first, right? But like the more you keep living by that mantra, the better you will be at making the decisions you need to make quicker. And the best way to do that is like by realizing that 24 hours cool was 48 hours if there are two of us.
Yeah.
And so like you do that and I do this. Like that would be like, I would wish we knew that earlier.
100%. 100%. I had the same. My last business had a co-founder, and we were, I guess, similar sort of age to you guys when you were starting. We were 22, 23 years old, and we were trying to do too much of the same thing. And it was just, we didn't do a good enough job of that delineation and really prioritizing what we were both best at separately. And it's tough with a co-founder model, especially when, for example, you're both commercially minded.
Yeah.
When you've got one who's like totally technology, one's commercial, super easy, right? The lines are very, very clear. But yeah, I think that's really great advice. And I also really love the idea of what was this? It was time is reality, prioritization is a
choice.
Is a choice. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I love that. And one of the things that I found as a founder, and maybe this is something I had my whole life anyway, is the guilt that comes with procrastination. I don't know about you, but for me, so I've got my to-do list every single day. I live and die by that to-do list. The impact it has psychologically on me when I've got something there which I know I should be doing, should be prioritizing, but not. Like honestly, it has such a big impact on me. So I find that trying to remove that procrastination and be really proactive, that impact for that on my anxiety, on guilt, and all those other things, massive.
Yeah. Do you use do you know something called the Pomodoro method?
No.
So like for anybody who struggles to like I'm the kind of person that I'll have a to-do list, but it's like 100 like lines long.
So it's never going to happen.
Never going to happen.
Right.
But like, so the idea of the Pomodoro method is you can get an app. I think it's called like Timekeeper on the App Store or something. And you set your time parameters. So you do one task for 20 minutes and you don't do anything else. So you don't check emails, you don't check BBC Sport, You literally just do that one task, 15 minutes or 20 minutes. You can set it yourself. And then after that, you have a 5-minute break. And in that 5 minutes, normally they say like, get up, stretch your legs or whatever, go have a glass of water or procrastinate, like purposeful procrastination.
Yeah.
Then another 15 to 20 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, 5 minutes. And then you have like a bigger 10 to 15 minute break. And for me, I think that's been like, well, when I use it, it's been like very helpful because what you find is to the question of like the guilt is someone in your team or someone might email you and you think you have to respond immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore you respond immediately, then you forget what you're doing, you go back. That task that you've been doing at first will take you a whole day because there's constant interruptions. So the better you can get at removing any interruption, the quicker you do that task. Then you can go on to that interruptions.
Yeah. Then
you can do another like when I use it, it's so helpful. And I always forget to use it.
No, it's really, really good. And I think it's interesting. Like when Connected was a bit earlier and same with the first few years of Real Sport, although I had to do so much because as you said, you're wearing all the hats, actually ability to do it is a bit easier, like boxing off the time. I find now that we're at like 70 people globally, it's just like that ability, it's just, I have no time. I just like focus time is so difficult, but it's something that I'm very much on that journey right now. And you know, when you're a leader, right, you really start to understand and learn more about yourself, and ultimately the culture that you build is a reflection of what's going on up here. 100%. You know, so it's a really interesting one. Again, we could probably speak about that for a couple hours. My next question for you is, what makes you proudest?
I don't know. It's a tough one. I think I want to be really specific with, like, it's the longevity, you know. I think that's like what makes me the most proud of what we've done within this business. Anyway, I'm like proud of other things, of course, outside of the business, but it's just the longevity of it. Like, I feel like only this year is when I feel like we've achieved to where I feel like we should be, right? Like, I think, you know, previous years, you can give yourself a pat on the back, and you should. And I think it's also very difficult. It's also important to always remember like what you wanted the year before, or the year before that, because when you get it, it's as humans, you want to, it's like, okay, cool, what's next? But
yeah,
like, so I caveat what I've just said with that. But when you look back, when I look back anyway, I'm always like, wow, you could have done a lot more. And there's probably times where it would have been easier to just kind of like give up, or for it to just fall by the wayside or what have you. But to have now been doing some form of iteration of the business for 10 years is something that I'm just like, wow, that's a long fucking time.
Huge commitment.
Like,
huge commitment.
Yeah. Like, we were 21 when we started, you know, and life has happened, like loss, wins, like everything's happened in between. And we're still here. Like, and not only we're still here, but we're in probably like the most prosperous year we've had. And I think that's probably the proudest thing that I can look back on and say, like, you've had a good innings, and you're still here, and you're still like prime and ready, and like in a growth phase, and still have the hunger and the passion and desire to make something of this. And it's cool because, like most people still to this day probably don't understand like the inner workings of the business. They see the aesthetic and they think they know, and they're like, oh, like how's that thing going? You're like, yeah, it's actually quite good, to be honest. Like, it's quite good. It's going well. And, we've had that for the whole time we've been doing it. And I think, like, being able to get to this stage without compromising who you are and being still your quote-unquote bullshit buzzword authentic self, and, like, being able to create, like, jobs and lives for people whilst doing something of value and having fun along the way for 10 years is like, I'm very proud of. Amazing.
No, and you should be. It's so easy for when times to get tough, to people to cop out. It's easy, right? And amazing to see that after 10 years, you've still got that growth, as you said. It's the fact that this year has been your best year and you feel like you're on the cusp of so many amazing things. And I think, like you say, keeping motivation for the same project for that length of time is really tough. Really tough. I've never been able to do that.
It's difficult.
Yeah, never been able to do that. So that's amazing. Okay, my second to last question for you is, what does it take to be successful?
What does it take to be successful? Understanding what success looks like to you, very first and foremost. Everybody's got different measurements of what success is, and I think as a society we need to lower the barrier of what we view as success, because I think most young people have quite like a singular minded view of successful people. You go on the street and you ask someone what's a successful person, and they'll probably say Elon Musk and like Mark Zuckerberg and all these multi-billionaires. And, I think, to me, we actually did a research project on success.
Oh, yeah.
Quite interestingly. And the most interesting answers I found were like, my mum's a successful person, my dad's a successful person, my brother's a successful person because, I don't know, they've beaten the odds, and my brother's graduated with a PhD just now. He's a doctor now. Like, that's successful, like most things, navigating life is tough, and most people in this world are successful people just by virtue of navigating life. Like, that's what I think.
That's
perfectly, do you know what I mean?
put.
Like, what's the odds of like you being born? Like, do you know what I mean?
The most impressive thing any one of us will ever do is just be here.
Born.
Yeah.
Like, that's a success. So I think first and foremost we've got to understand what your definition of success is as a person, and then B, like, lower that. And then I think C is to probably just like, is to not change how you get to whatever that definition is. Not change yourself to get to that definition. If you can remain yourself, like, be yourself, not compromise that, not have to change you, like, and still get to that definition of success. To me, that's very successful as well. It's a tough one, because for me personally, what success looks like for me personally has actually just changed as I've grown older, and probably will change tomorrow.
Yes.
But
goalposts always move.
The goalposts move. But I think the one thing that I've always wanted to be successful is just to be able to provide like a good life for my loved ones, in whatever that looks like. Good health, good wealth, prosperity, but the wealth just to allow them to live life and like have the experiences that they should on this earth. And so, like, if I can, and again, it's not my sole duty to do it, but if I can be a provider of allowing that to happen for me and my loved ones, then I feel like I'm successful.
Yeah.
And that's my definition. And so, like, I think it's very important to understand yours, and then be hyper focused on it without changing yourself.
Love that. All right, last one for you. Your 15-year-old self walks in the room right now. What are you going to tell him?
I'll tell him, keep selling those donuts. Like keep at it, because it's gonna help you, and keep being disruptive. Like it's funny because last week we got nominated for this award, and the title's Disruptor of the Year.
Okay.
And like the other day, I was looking through. My mum and dad have kept like this massive folder of all my like school reports, detentions, parents' evenings, all of that, like letters I wrote to them saying sorry. And like the one word that was like, you know, fairly consistent amongst many others was like disruptive in class, or like, you know, prefers to have a laugh rather than learning, or has great potential, but you know. And so that word, and it's quite similar to my business partner actually, that word disruptor or disruptive has such a different meaning when we were in school to like now, where everything is like, you know, be a disruptor and be challenging and all of these things. So I would just say keep on being you, and like, you know, it will pay dividends. Like, it will pay dividends because, you know, if you conform to something else, maybe you won't take risks. Maybe you won't want to like start a business when you have a bit of comfort. Really like lean into your innate personality, because I think when people do that, that's where they win better and win quicker for themselves. So yeah, I would just say keep doing what you're doing. Just keep being annoying to people. But probably also I would say like really understand networks as well. Like it's very important to like keep in contact with people, and not for any particular reason, but you just don't know where it's going to help down the line. And that's been very important for me personally, like the ability to get on with people, the ability to have conversations with people of every and any walk of life is vital, I think, for everybody. So yeah, keep putting yourself out of your comfort zone. Actually, that's probably one change I'd say like challenge yourself, like to challenge the status quo of what you think, you know, 15-year-old should look like or be like, or like, you know, what they should like. Change that mentality and just do you. Like, keep doing you.
Amazing.
What do I say?
Amazing. Thank you so much. What do you want to plug?
What do I want to plug? I feel like I should plug new music, but I'm not a musician. What do I want to
plug? New music.
What do I
might not be involved
new
in
music?
it.
I might not be involved in it. No, what do I want to plug? That's an interesting question. I want to plug
where can
this.
people find you?
I'll plug this podcast because I really like it. I like the idea of taking risks and like challenging yourself to do it on a more frequent basis. So I'll plug this podcast. I'll plug Word on the Curb in general as an organization. If you are an organization or an individual that wants to better engage with millennial, minority or Gen Z demographics, then come to us, because no other agency will do it as good. And we do that through insight, and we use the insight to then inform creative strategies. So yeah, give us a shout.
Amazing. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, man.
Thanks for watching the episode. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit subscribe below so that you can support the podcast and we can keep on bringing you amazing new guests. If you want to see the other amazing episodes in this podcast, click into our series section. As ever, if there are any other guests or topics you want us to explore, just let me know in the comments and we'll do our best to bring someone in.